Yeah. Welcome to the Mix Live. This is Jason Rios.
What's happening? I'm Lefty Hernandez.
And we are tuned into the Mix Lab.
Yes, we are kicking it live. As we do every Tuesday, the place to be is right here at the Mix Lab, Whcr 90.3 FM. We are the voice of Harlem, but in this case, we're coming to you everywhere, all over New York.
That's right. Get it right, Lefty. Get it right.
That's what we do, man. How are you, man?
All right. We got a special guest today in the studio.
What do we got? I'm going to call you, you know what? From this point on, I'm going to call you Mr. Yeah, Mr. All right.
Yeah. What a mess.
So, Jason, what's happening today? What do we got?
We got something very special today lined up, you know?
What? Okay. That's usually the case on Tuesdays. And so what might that case be today? What's special today?
We got a legend in the building today.
Oh, who do we have?
You want to know who we have? All right.
Wait, excuse me, sir.
Do you want to know who we have?
Would you like to know who you are? Yeah. Oh man. So all right. So look, we always talk music in the shops. We've got some great guests coming through our studio. We've been blessed with so many talented people, people from the music business, just so from all over. And we try to enlighten you guys, our listeners, and bring you up to speed with the past, the present, and what's happening today and even for tomorrow. So today we've got another great talent in the studio. Go ahead, Jason. You placed the call. Who do we have?
We have the honor of having legendary Carlos Berrios in the building.
Yes.
I don't even know where to start. DJ, film editor, re-recording mixer, music producer, director, and can I say actor?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay.
All right.
And actor as well, you know?
I know. I got my hands up. Teacher. Yeah.
I did study.
Yeah. There
so
you go.
There's that. Yeah.
So welcome. So in the studio once again, Carlos Berrios. Welcome to our studio, the Mix Lab right here.
Thank you.
Gracias. Thanks for being here with us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're gonna dive right in because you've got a lot of great history. You've got a lot of great information. For those that know, I do my best to let people know. Modern technology, right? Just all you got to do is Google Carlos Berrios, and you're gonna get a handful of information, and we'll bring you up to speed too. And he's gonna tell us a lot more about himself too. And I've got a zillion questions as always, man. But I remember, so again, back in the day, being a DJ and the days of the record industry and the record pool and a lot of things, and when freestyle was becoming a new thing, and the radio stations back then, and DJs being now the new producers, the young producers, and the editors, and you were one of them. You got an early jump, so so bring us back. So once again, Carlos Berrios in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
It's kind of nerve-wracking. It's like, countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2.
Go. You're on. Perform. Go on. You got 10 seconds to give us like 100 pointers.
Right.
Yeah. So what's happening?
No, it's always fun, going back, reminiscing, talking about the old days. A lot of times I find that with these conversations, you always tend to remember things that you forgot, a long time ago, because you're one of the first people I've talked to for a long time that actually worked with Eddie Rivera. And so, of course, that takes us back to the record pool and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
And we were discussing it because, you would think that because I was in Queens that I would have been in Art PBC or IDRC, the early version. But no, I ended up in VIP with Al Pizarro in the Bronx.
Yeah, I found that, and in knowing so much about you and history, I didn't realize. I knew, and you were affiliated with so many people, and record pool wise back then too. There were so many, but I know you to be a Queens guy, and so I thought Gene Soterio had Real Record, two E's, REEL, Real Record Pool, and I thought you were with him.
No, the funny thing is, I was in Al's pool only because of Omar. Omar was already in the pool.
Okay.
And so when me and Omar became partners, he brought me, to the Bronx. And so that's all I knew. And so by the time I started to make records, like a year and a half later or 2 years later, I was already in VIP, so I wasn't going to leave VIP to jump to another record pool,
Back then too, so
there was a loyalty thing,
right? Yeah, loyalty, and so for people, when he says Omar, so that's another great DJ who's still around, and if he were in New York, we'd get him in here too. Omar Santana.
Santana.
And we're gonna go and tell everybody, all the parts and all the people and all the. All the roles that we had back in the day. So I always start when we get guests in here You know, first we both wave to Jason and we say hi,
What up, Jason?
just to acknowledge and remember that he's there with us. Yeah. Jason. So yeah, I always tell the story. Jason, invited me to be a part of this, and we're really trying to really blow this up to the next level. And now we've got great guests like you come in, and I always like to begin at the beginning. So for you, music, it's part of your life. It made, brought you to where you are today, but how and where did it all start for you? Tell us, take us all the way back, even like, I mean, for a lot of us, our parents, the 45s, whatever it was. So
most of the people, right? Because we're all Latino in here, right, in the room. So most of the people that I met later on, obviously predominantly Puerto Rican, either from Spanish Harlem or from the Bronx, but I grew up in Flushing, Queens. And so in Flushing, there were pockets of groups like it wasn't the Bronx and it wasn't Brooklyn, and it wasn't, but we had our projects and we had our situations.
Right.
So I remember early on, like I had to have been like 78. I went to.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
We got a phone call already. Let's see who's on the phone.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. So we're gonna get back to that. Just as it's curious, right? So this has been blowing up. We get phone calls now. People.
Yeah. Let's see who's on the line. Who's on the line?
Someone.
Hi, I'm calling up to speak to Mr. Carlos Berrios.
I don't know. That voice sounds familiar. I'm a little scared now.
Hey, listen, if you want MTA, I'll give you the phone number for that. So he's looking for Carlos.
Yeah.
Stand clear of the closing doors.
There you go.
Hopefully that'll bring some fond memories. Right, Mr. Berrios?
I vaguely remember the voice, but yeah. Whoever it is a troublemaker for sure.
He got me pinned. He's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's only one way that he'll know who's speaking. I know this.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Go ahead.
Berrios!
Oh, Sammy Zone.
It's funny we didn't get to talk about him before, but we are now. So, ladies and gentlemen, on the phone, where we start our show with interviews and our guests and getting into the stories. Today, we start at the end, the tail end. We start with the phone call. So, welcome. Sammy Zone is on the air. For those that know or don't know, he's another talented performing artist. Sammy.
Yeah.
Do you know who I?
Lucky I didn't do my Elmo voice. That would have really threw him off.
Sammy, but do you know who I am? Now you see, now we're playing tricks on you. Do you know who I am? I'm gonna give you a hint, bro.
Do I have you in my contacts? That's one.
I don't know. You should have, because I met you a long time ago when you was a little bitty baby trying to begin to sing.
Wow.
I'm gonna give you another clue. LES, Lower East Side.
Bro, so that's a horrible clue, I got to be honest, because I know everyone in the LES. So I would have to run through a Rolodex of names that I know.
But aren't you from LES?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Born and raised. Man.
Okay. All right. That's all I need. I just want to make sure I'm not going cuckoo. So there was a little label on Attorney Street called New York Tracks Record. Do you remember that?
Absolutely forgot about it.
You had a partner, a singing partner. You remember your singing partner?
Yeah.
You remember in the little group, and there was a duo, the girl group. You remember them?
Yes, of course. Split Decision.
Split Decision. Very good. Do you remember who handled that label?
Oh, this is not Armando, right?
No, those are the guys. But those are the guys that funded. I know. I just took over this conversation.
All right,
he called it for Carlos.
All right, Sammy. This ain't the Sammy Zone interview. Sammy, hang up.
Sammy.
Call back later.
No, right? Yo, man, no, you got to come straight.
All right. So look, I'm gonna put you on with Carlos. This is Lefty Hernandez, and we'll talk later.
Man, what's up, brother? How are you, man?
We're gonna talk later. Talk to Carlos. You called in. All right. You interrupted him, I interrupted you, and now we both interrupted Carlos. He's our guest, and time is limited. So we're going to throw it back to Carlos and you, man. Say hi to Carlos.
All right, Mr. Berrios.
Oh,
Sam. My bro.
Sammy.
I'm going to be quick because I don't want to take up too much of the time here.
Yeah.
But for those of you who don't know, me and Carlos were born on different years, but he's actually my twin. My maternal twin, because this man is closer to me than anything on the planet. So with that said, Roll them.
Thank you, Sammy.
We're
Thank
gonna
you,
get
Sammy.
Sammy. We're gonna talk after this. I'll get your number. We'll talk. We'll get you up at the station. We'll bring you back, even with Carlos, whatever. But thank you so much for calling us, Ron. And
No, my pleasure, bro. Listen, Carlos is full of super insight, so yeah, he's the guy to talk to.
awesome. Yeah, he's gonna give a story. So I hope you behave.
Thanks for calling,
All right.
my brother. Blessings to you,
All right,
wifey,
guys.
and the kids. Okay.
All right.
Thank you guys. All right, brother.
All right.
Bye.
Blessings, brother.
Thanks, Sammy. Bye. Yeah. Awesome. Sorry about that, Carlos.
No, that's
Yeah,
cool.
That's All right. That's
I tell you, he was a troublemaker.
Yeah, he was. But I'm gonna shut up too.
All right. So yeah, 1979 is when I first started DJing, and I was taught by an older cat from the neighborhood, he's still around. He's one of my very best friends, and you know, he's hangs a lot now with Tony Touch. You know, so it's like we have this community that started a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, back in the neighborhood, and it continues on. You know, with them and my brother. You know, Will Knox, and you know, and they've all been actively trying to get me to start DJing again, which I haven't done for like 35 years. You know, so I don't think I'll ever go out there and do crowds or anything like that.
You used to play on turntables, right?
Well, that's all they had was turntables. Although the ones I had, you know, they had cranks.
I used to DJ on cassettes. Believe it or not, I was the king of the editing of cassettes, and I know you were too back in the days, right?
I really wasn't a king. We started doing that early on, and I'll be honest with you, I don't remember where I picked that up from because I only learned later on that that's what the Latin Rascals were doing.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So before tape editing, they were pause buttoning,
Right.
and doing mixes like that,
Yeah.
which is like insane,
Yeah.
right?
But it's funny because that's how a lot of DJs started, and they got that skill.
Yeah, just to do the repetition of the phrasings and that
Right.
sort of thing. Yeah.
And if they had a good radio, because sometimes it was all about that pause button. You had to really, the timing of it, punch
You
it
had
in.
to have incredible timing.
You had to punch it in.
And so I got pretty good with the pause buttoning, but it wasn't here in New York. This was I was in Colombia during that time.
Really?
Yeah, because I had to finish. It's one of those stories. I have to tell it because if it wasn't for Colombia, I would have never got into the music industry.
Right.
Like honestly, I would have never got into the music industry. I was a DJ first in the neighborhood. I was a kid, 14 years old probably, and I ended up having to go to Colombia because my dad got a job down there, and it was going to be good for me and my brother to go to good school and that kind of thing.
Right.
And of course, there was culture shock and everything shock. And so I found myself gravitating after the second year to the nightclub, and I found what was supposed to be the biggest nightclub in the city, Barranquilla, the city.
Barranquilla.
But right now, my brother Frank Rios is laughing because every time I say the word Barranquilla, he starts cracking up because it's because it's a crazy story. Anyway, so I go to the nightclub. I'm probably 15 years old, maybe 16. I don't remember how old I was. I don't remember the year. And they didn't have a DJ. What they had, this is the biggest nightclub, and they even had one of those, Tony Manero flashing dance floors and everything. Very fancy place. It was a bottle service.
Right.
So I go in there, and it was a guy putting a needle to the record. Everybody's dancing. The record ends. Everybody applauds, and they leave the dance floor.
Yeah.
And then the next record plays. So I was like, bing! I got a little, light bulb, right?
Wow.
But I didn't have the courage to do it that night. So I went back sometime later, and I asked for and I spoke to the guy who ended up being the DJ, but he also turned out to be the music director for the biggest radio station in the city.
Is that TJ?
Yeah, TJ, Tony Hernandez. Yeah, TJ, yeah. So shout out to TJ, Tony Hernandez in Barranquilla, Colombia.
Wow.
So the funny thing is they reached out to me a couple of years ago during the pandemic because in Colombia, there were, in every city, there's these big DJs, of course, now, and so the ones on that coast, because Barranquilla is a coastal city, they credit him for teaching the concept of DJing, and he always kept saying, because he didn't remember, like he never put two and two together that I was the one that was doing the records later on.
Yeah.
So he always said there was this cat from New York, and he was here, and he's the one that taught me. Couldn't remember my name or nothing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
That's
So
funny.
then finally, one of those younger guys figured it out, and they reached out to me, and they said, "Yo, we have TJ." I was like, "Yo, you know, it was bananas. But they let me know. I was the one that taught him, so he's the one that taught the other younger kids, and so I literally introduced the
concept,
the culture to that city.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So that is a great story. And so again, so I know you started telling us that you were from Flushing?
From Flushing, Queens. Yeah.
So are you New York born and raised, or are you from Colombia? Yeah, your family.
Well, I came when I was 3 months old. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Does that count?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
and so you know what I'm saying is though that so you went back to your country, your culture.
Yeah, but by the time I went back, I couldn't speak Spanish. It's like that kind of
you
thing.
were
Yeah,
American,
it was a whole it was
Wow.
It's a whole different world.
yeah. As a matter of fact, I did. They brought me up to the radio station. There's a picture of me at that radio station with the reel to reels.
Oh yeah.
Because at that point I knew about the Latin Rascals, and I was telling him. So he wanted to help me, and he asked the radio station. He got permission for them to lend
take it
me
home, yeah.
to take it home, and he literally ordered an edit block that took like 60 days for it to arrive from Miami, and it was my first edit block, and I did my first mega mix there. Splicing, nothing crazy. It was just just blending and doing simple things, but it was the first one that I did, and of course I was I was a star for 10 seconds in my high school, right? And
That's
so
awesome.
the big celebrity DJ Marco Aurelio, he says Marco
I know
Aurelio.
Marco.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember his last name, but he asked for me to do an interview, not realizing that my Spanish was horrendous, and so here I am trying to talk to him. So he said something I didn't understand. He goes, "Aquí estamos con el gringo chimbiao," which in Spanish means the fake white guy. You know what I'm saying? The fake gringo.
gosh.
So it was.
And you were like, "Yay!"
yeah. Well, I didn't know what it meant. I was like, Tony, what the fuck?
What does he say?
Sorry. What does that? Yeah, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But no, it was fun. It was a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and those moments right there, those moments. The reason why I always bring them up is because those were the seeds planted for my, it gave me the idea that I could do it, that I could do something.
Right. Of course, definitely.
So when I came back to New York, it was a few years later, but when I came back to New York, it only took 1 year before I put out bits and pieces.
right.
I had met Omar Santana. I'm editing with him now, and he's teaching me the ropes in the studios and that sort of thing. Because when I came back, the first thing I did was I bought a tiny little reel-to-reel.
right.
I think my day job was I was a bank teller at Citibank at the time. I had a couple of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I was horrible, all of them. So I bought a little reel-to-reel, and I spent that summer teaching myself how to edit.
Right.
And those lessons, those reels, ended up being Bits and Pieces 86 and Bits and Pieces 87.
Right. I got
I
those.
saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, and at the same time, I was going to, because I didn't know anything, and I thought maybe, I don't know why I thought to be a record producer, you had to go to one of these engineering schools.
Right.
And so I ended up at the Institute of Audio Research. And who ended up being my classmate, but Nordi Cotto.
Naughty.
Get out of
Yeah,
here.
Nordi Cotto was my classmate. And he was a good student, and I was the worst student in the world. I kept coming in with hangovers and late and no homework. And, and he would, Nordi would have pity on me. He would let me copy his homework and stuff like that.
Stop.
But I was already editing, so Nordi knew this, and he knew, of course, he knew Omar, and of Omar, and so when Nordi left the school, he ended up working at Power Play Studios in Astoria, Queens, which is like a hip hop, studio capital, and he started to bring me in, to do stuff over there. So I did like Bingo Bongo with him. I was there. He invited me to the recording of Do You Want to Dance, Arroz con Pollo, and all of that.
Yeah.
And I remember standing in the studio, right? Because he wanted me to go in there, and like it was a group of people, like his friends, his people. And he's like, "Come on, get in here." And they're like, "Arroz con pollo." And I'm looking at him like, "You are out of your mind. Are you crazy? Like, what is this?" And it ended up being like the biggest hit.
Yeah.
It was tremendous.
But it's funny,
give him a lot of credit.
the titles of these songs that we had back in the days, right?
Yeah.
We had one that my father used to hate. My
Yeah.
brother used to put it on. It was called Flight Tetas.
Yeah.
And my father was like, Flight Tetas off.
Yeah.
Can we say that? I guess we can.
Everybody was trying
said,
to
yeah.
everybody was trying to push the envelope.
Yeah.
But just to go back, that's why I kept saying even before we started, it's like I was lucky to be in the room with anybody because I wasn't really trying to do anything.
During that summer, it was just you and that editing machine, right?
I honestly, I lived alone already, struggling to pay the rent, and my friends would come over. I would never go out, so they
Yeah.
would come. I would be working.
I know
They'd
those
come
days.
over, hang out a little bit,
And
and then every time they leave, there'd be a box of pizza and a couple of empty 6-packs, right? Over a several months period, by the time the summer was over, because I'm a kid, right? So I'm not, I haven't learned about taking care of myself yet. So there was a stack of like 25 boxes of empty pizza boxes, and like just a wall of empty, beer. You know what I'm saying? But that was the summer that I learned. It was like a crash course. I just taught myself. I just kept doing it over and over, and I just wouldn't leave until I figured this thing out.
But I was reading somewhere, or I think I was hearing somewhere, that you had one guest that came over. You didn't know who it was until at the end, before when he was.
Well,
leaving.
this was that was the fateful meeting, right? So what happens? So now I'm editing. I'm putting my mixes on cassettes, and handing them out, to people, and so word is getting out. Everybody wants these tapes that say After Dark, and so one of these tapes ends up in the hands of a friend of mine, a guy that I knew. I don't remember how I knew him, but I knew him, and he calls me one day and he goes, "Listen, I want to come over. I'm in the neighborhood. Do you have a minute?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, come over." So he comes over, and he's got this guy with him, and so they both sit on the couch, and of course, I'm young and I'm full of myself, and so I'm going on and on about what I'm doing, and I'm doing these
the work
my editing, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. I don't remember what I was saying, but whatever it was, I was full of it, right?
And no, it's exciting. It's a new time,
and the
right?
guy on the couch is not saying anything, right? And I'm just like, my vibe, like I sometimes you just feel it.
Yeah.
I already knew, right? And I'm not going to ask. I'm not asking. He's not introduced. No. So 15 minutes later, they stand up. All right, we got to go. And now they're walking out the door. And it's like, okay, so now I got to ask. I said, "Excuse me, I didn't get your name." And he looks at me. He goes, "Oh, my name is Omar." And I said, "Omar what?" And he said, "Omar Santana." I said, "I knew it. Yeah. And he's like, "Yeah." And then everything changed. The energy changed.
Yeah.
And he was like, and he said, "Listen, I've heard, your work. I like what you're doing. I have so much work. I need a partner, if you're willing, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
And practically the next day he put me to work. I was editing some hip hop record,
And
out of his attic.
And then you added another member, right?
Where Frankie he was already hanging with Frankie Bones.
Okay.
So Frankie Bones he was writing for, I think it was Chartbeat or DMC.
You remember Chartbeat? That was the pink one. That was the small.
I forgot his name.
Pink.
Stan something. The guy that ran it. I forgot his name.
I know what he's talking about. Yeah, I forgot.
Yeah, so he would do reviews and things like that. And
it was Chartbeat. I remember Frankie. That's right. Frankie
yeah.
Bones did have a.
So it was always the three of us. Always in the studio. And Omar had already made a name for himself. As a matter of fact, the reason why I knew his name was because I believed that I was going to be the next Latin Rascals, right? My edits, I was like really, again, full of myself. But then all of a sudden in the record pool, I get this record by Leather and Lace, Let Your Body Go,
Okay.
right? And it was either Let Your Body Go or the other one, Tender Hearts. Both of them were like soul crushing to me because I put it on and I hear the edits and I know their edits right away. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so good, right? And so now I'm jealous already because it's so good. It's so much better than what I'm doing. And then I grabbed the record and I'm like, who is this? And it says Omar Santana. I said, my God, not only is he better than me, but he's got the coolest name in the world, Omar Santana. Right?
Yeah, you have to have a ring, right?
So
Amazing.
when that thing happened, when he came over and we met, it was just fate. It was just supposed to happen somehow.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that great stuff, great stories here.
Yeah.
So initially, I mean, you started telling us, you're from Flushing, Queens, and so music. Did you DJ? I know we talked about that before.
Yeah, I DJ'd a lot. I mean, I DJ'd in New York. I DJ'd in Colombia. But when I came back to New York, I wasn't DJing anymore until. Okay, so I'm here. I don't remember if I came back in '85. I think it was '85. '86 was the struggle. I met Omar. We're working, and we're doing some really incredible work, because he already had the ins,
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing, Duran Duran,
Right.
Rolling Stones, we're working with Jazzy J. We're doing all kinds of stuff.
Amazing.
But the crowning achievement for us, we always felt, was the mega medley we did for Mantronic. The Music Madness album. Yeah,
Sleeping Bag.
So they hired us to do a medley.
Who hired you? Will Sokolov?
Will Sokolov, but also with Mantronic, because Mantronic had already hired Omar to do some edits for Tila Rock. Right?
Yeah.
And so we decided that we were going to just blow everybody away. So we were in the studio, I don't know how many days, surviving on cookies and soda, right? And he was already amped, like very hyper to begin with. But we actually invented the Transformer edit in that session. And we invented edits. We invented swinging edits, Transformer edits, and we were so happy with what we did. And when we turned it in, Mantronic said no. It's too wild.
Yeah.
He said it's too wild. It's like,
Interesting. Do you want to explain what those edits are? Swing edit, or is that a trader's secret?
No, swing edit. Well, Transformer edits, or we call them Transformer edits because, in the same way, like you jump the fader and you're going.
You chop it.
Yeah, so you take 16th notes, and then you cut the 16th in half and replace the second half with leader tape, basically blank tape.
Right.
So now when it's going. You know what I'm saying?
Very nice.
Yeah. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So and it's interesting, right? Because chopping a 16th note would make it literally a 32nd, but you're putting simply a space between them just to do exactly that. I get it. When you hear it.
Yeah.
When you hear it.
Yeah.
But I mean, technically, you're not. It's not a 30. But you know what I mean. In sound.
Yeah, we tried to do some crazy stuff, but we always knew that it was groundbreaking, the editing that we did, and it never saw the light of day. So Mantronic went back to Chep, and Chep ended up doing the his version, his version, which was tamer, but probably more appropriate. But what we did was
that's amazing.
When you guys were creating all of this, were you guys down as the hit squad, or were you guys
the hit squad? Yeah.
Or you weren't using your individual names?
No,
we were really
we were the hit squad.
So and again, all our listeners, once again, you're listening to our very special guest, Carlos Berrios, is in the studio with us here at the Mix Lab. Jason Rios, your host. I'm Lefty Hernandez. Every Tuesday from 6 to 8, WHCR 90.3 FM. And I wanted to mention, because you're doing some great history, which I love, but to enlighten our listeners, some may or may not know, right? So you mentioned Chep Nunez. So just to kind of like back in the day, right? So all the great music that was making New York and all over the world is now going cross country and around the world. And a lot of the music was, that's recorded, some good songs, and now it's being brought to DJs and remixers and editors, and you guys. That's you guys, right? And the work that you guys did was just amazing. And back then, there were so many great editors coming up, and that were definitely at the top of the notch. And you were what? So there was the Latin Rascals, Tony Moran and Albert Cabrera. Mm-hmm. There was, as we mentioned, Chet Nunez, who unfortunately we lost, and it's such a sad story. Mm-hmm. And he died a hero in my eyes, but because he went in to help people in a fire. Mm-hmm. Then we've had then Omar Santana, which became your partner, and then Carlos Berrios, who's sitting in the studio here with us. So, and I say that for the public to know, right? Because we share stories of all these people that we bring into the studios that, everyone knows the songs and they remember the song and they remember the club and they remember the history, but they don't know how that came to be. Sure. We try to enlighten people, and we try to let people know. So here you go, and we bring you guys in so that people can say, "Oh wow, I never knew that," and that's that wow factor. But we talk about people, you and I and Jason. We talk about people because these are people who were part of our, our career, upbringing. But a lot of people don't know who these people are. So I just want to, share that.
Yeah. So I'm just rambling. You know what I'm saying? So
no, not at all.
I'm realizing now, like nobody has any idea what editing is.
And
what it entails.
But that's the whole point of you sitting there.
I wanted to ask you a question. From your very first time, I mean, your mom played music in the house. You were in, you like my family, especially Christmas time. The Spanish songs, the coquito, the pasteles being made, and the music is playing all day long. From that time to the time that you started your first credit album trilogy, the bonus beat, right? From the time that you were getting into the music to the first time you had your first credited trilogy track that came
Is
out?
that Trilogy the group? Or Trilogy? No.
Trilogy. You talking about trilogy?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Trilogy.
that was Omar. That wasn't me.
Oh, okay. I thought, but you were a part of it, right? That was the first one that you got credit for.
The first one I
did
got
the
credit.
bonus.
Latin Love.
Yeah.
You're my Latin
Right,
Love.
yeah, 'cause he did the,
Yeah,
um,
but I didn't do any of those records.
Okay, no, but you did the bonus beat, didn't you?
Yeah, that was actually the first thing I ever cut tape, like in the
Right,
studio.
right.
Omar brought me in at the tail end of that one, and that was my first.
So
credit.
from that time to that time, what was the difference? Like you felt like this is what I want to do. Now you got credited for it, and you're like, this is what I want now, right? I mean, what was that feeling like? You know, like.
But again, this is what I mean. It's like I had no plan. I was just sort of going with the flow.
Things evolve, right?
Yeah, I was just happy to be a part of something.
And that's a great point, because we're going to talk about where you are today and the things in the work. And again, we here at the Mix Lab, we're talking music, and this man right here has gone one step, beyond. And you and I, we talk music and all that stuff, but we're going to talk about the fact that Carlos Berrios has created a career in the film industry.
Yep.
And so, but we will, take us. So you're going to bring us up to speed. I just don't want. I love these moments, because I don't want people to miss out all these great, stories that you guys have, and what brings you, from one step to the next. Like he just said,
Well,
how you end up.
like that was a transition because like I had several partners, right? So Omar was my first partner after we stopped working with each other. I was DJing at Lemoore East in Queens.
Queens Boulevard.
Queens Boulevard, yeah. That's a whole story, because the origins of Lemoore East go back to my neighborhood and the kids from my neighborhood who were working for this guy who owned the concession stand at Whitestone Lanes, the bowling alley, right?
Okay.
Over there in Whitestone. And he was the son of the people who owned the place. And so I think it was like either his 20th birthday or 25th birthday. I don't remember what it was, but he was their boss, and he had money, so he wanted to rent the place, and so they said, well, if you do, you gotta have, you gotta get after dark, he's got to be your DJ, blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a meeting. He comes to me, and I'm like, well, do you have a spot? He goes, yeah, it's a place called Lemoore East on Queens Boulevard. I said, I don't know it. Can we go see it? So we go. It's it's a disaster. Yeah, it's a disaster. I'm not going to tell the whole story, but
they used to do live shows there too. That's why.
The bottom line is, he got the kids, he paid them all to clean it out and set up the opening night for his birthday party to be, I think it was August 20th, 1987. So of course I was the DJ, and I told him, this place is huge, and you need groups, you need acts, because I already knew at that point you need groups. Otherwise, it's going to be you, me, and a couple of guys in a place that holds 3,000 people.
Right.
It's going to be silly. So, I called Al Pizarro and I said, "Do you know anybody who does these club promotions?" So he hooked me up with Vinny Grillo, who was also in the record pool, and so I made the introduction. And of course, Vinny Grillo came in and right away, just tried to take over and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was big back then.
Yeah, so it got a little stupid later on, but for a minute it was wonderful. That was the opening night. So anyway, so now I'm DJing in front of 3,000 whatever people. It was crazy. The first year of that place was bananas. I mean, it was unlike anything you've ever seen. Well, I mean, you know what I mean, especially in Queens. They ended up closing the place for a couple of months while Richard Long came in and put in a real system.
Richard Long system.
Yeah,
oh,
so
my goodness.
yeah, so it was so we had good equipment.
Right.
Anyway, so it was around this time that I met Frank Reyes. Frank Reyes was somebody who's done a lot of things. He traveled the world as a teenager, as a professional dancer in a professional dance troupe. He's been in all kinds of like first-time functions, like the opening of Studio 54 and all kinds of really a lot of stuff. He has amazing stories. So I met him because he was managing a girl who ended up being Rihanna Page, and he was trying to get her a producer. So, and I remember I met with them, and I met Rihanna Page, and at that time, I for whatever reason, I don't know anything, you know what I'm saying? So I look at her, and I'm like, I don't know, I'm not interested. I don't know what you're talking about, right? So we sort of let that go. But it also turned out, because I was already working with Karina on my first record. And as a matter of fact, the demo to Out of Control, because it was a demo that I was shopping for a long time. because I already, as an editor, was connected to all the labels and all the A&Rs, right? Because we were hired by all of them. Right. So I took it to everybody, and they said no. Everybody said no. So I went to the Indies. They said no. And I remember Aldo Marin was one of them. You know, I took it to him, and he said, he just said no. What happens? I put Karina on. You know, we have Karina open up with the demo on the opening night of Lemoore East. Right away, Aldo runs up the stairs, and he's like, "Yo, is that the demo you showed me? That's the girl?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "All right, call me Monday." You know?
Oh,
yeah. So obviously he signed her. He didn't sign my record. You know what I mean? Anyway, Frankie Bones he was the writer of those lyrics also.
Wow.
Even though Karina, you know, there were a lot of people that contributed to that record, and believe it or not, there's a couple that I can't remember who the hell they are. Mm-hmm. But being my first record, not knowing anything about what I was doing, it was a shock. You know, it was just a shock that it came out as good as it did. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so it turns out that Frank Reyes, because he was a professional dancer, was also choreographing groups now, which is you know, part of what he was doing with Rihanna and managing her, and you know, all these. He's a very smart guy, very astute, and you know, very strong personality. But he was also choreographing Karina. I didn't know this when I was working with Karina. I found that out later on. Mm-hmm. But it's funny again, the circle. You know what I mean? It's just it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. And so, about I don't remember how much longer after that. Rihanna ended up doing a record. She got signed to Sleeping Bag. Mm-hmm. I don't really know too much about that history. He also did a song with Todd Terry. Frank Reyes wrote a song that Todd Terry did for another group that Frank was working with, Anne Marie. Mm-hmm. Just Waiting for You, it's called. And so one day Frank calls me on the phone, and so I figure, you know, maybe he's got another group, you know, another artist. So he calls me. He goes, "Listen, I want to try something, and I think you're the guy. You're the guy I want to collaborate with on this, you know." So I said, "Yeah, come over, you know." And honestly, between come over and like yesterday, I don't remember what happened because we never split. Like it was like we were together 24/7. And so, you know, he taught me another side of the music business, which I wasn't exposed to. Like I wasn't in that circle. I was surrounded by technicians. Right. You know, we were engineers and editors and, you know, buttons. And so I was not, I was never around someone who was deeply aware of the creativity, like art and expression and individuality and that sort of thing. And so those were the things that I learned, you know, from working on countless demos with Frank Reyes. You know, he would introduce me to Beatles documentaries and documentaries, period. Right. So we just started learning. So I was learning so much. I was just like soaking all this stuff up.
Different genres, right?
Yeah, totally. Just a whole. It's just a different way of looking at what you're doing. Right. You know, in other words, there's, of course, you know, you have to be a technician, you do, but there also has to be an individualistic expression to what you're doing also.
Artistic point of view. Huh?
Yeah, so whether or not, you know, you're doing it without knowing it or not, you know, you don't, I didn't realize that I was already kind of doing my own thing because I made a mistake early on, which was I believed that in order to be a record producer, you had to play your own keyboards and program your own drums. That's not true.
You're right, it's not.
Not true at all. Yeah. But that's what I did. And so my early records were very weird. That's the way they would describe them. Right. They're like, your music is weird and dark. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So now I get into conversations with Frank about this stuff. And Karina was also involved in these conversations heavy. It was Karina, Tomax, Frank Reyes, me, and Pepper, who was managing Karina at the time. And we would get into these heavy discussions. And to be honest with you, a lot of it was almost over my head. I could feel it in my heart, but I couldn't really discuss it. Right. I didn't have the vocabulary yet, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, the worst thing Frank ever did, and I remember the day it happened, we were driving on a train, we're going to the city, and I'm saying, you know, I wish I could keep up with you guys, blah, blah, and all this stuff. And he looks at me, he goes, you know, you're an artist, right? And that was it. I was like, I'm an artist? Oh,
wow.
Sorry. I was like, look out, I'm an artist, right?
Yeah. By the way, ya van dos. One more, we start charging because we have to pay the fines. No.
So now, me and Frank worked on so many demos that eventually you know, one of them had to get signed. We were shopping a 3 demo thing with different artists. Lisette was one of them. Believe it or not, Frank was one of them. He was singing one of the songs, 2 of the songs. One of them that ultimately ended up going to Coro later, "Do Unto Me."
Mm-hmm.
But you know, we had this whole thing going on, and we were presenting it as a package and the whole thing. But nobody was really buying it, and part of the reason was, I think, because of it was darker than the commercial stuff.
Right.
So then we get to Together Forever, right? Together Forever was actually a demo, a song that Frank Reyes wrote the song. Frank Reyes was writing all these lyrics. He was writing the songs, the melodies, and everything, right?
Wow.
I'm doing the beats and all that stuff. Frankie Cutlass, I met because when we did Make Noise with Lisette in '87, we were doing the dives with and more, who had You'll Never Find Another Love.
Right.
So we would always be at the same places in the basements,
right.
and sometimes, you know, almost like practically getting robbed and stuff, right? So we're going through all these learning experiences. I do a second record with Lisette Melendez, and what happens? It flops, and so they drop her at the same time that we were just finishing up the idea of Together Forever. But Together Forever was supposed to be for Frankie Cutlass. This is like it's like a weird story. Frankie was involved with Mark Anthony and La India, and they were working on some Latin stuff and some other stuff out of a small studio in the Bronx. And I know somehow that I'm sorry, not La India, Chris Yais. And Frankie had done a demo that K7 was involved with, but Frankie is singing, called "Give Your Love to Me." We got the demo, we got the tape with Frankie singing the song, and he sounded great. I'm like, Frankie, you could sing? What? You know? Plus, he's got that personality, that bubbly thing going on. So what he did was he got George Lamond, Mark Anthony, Chris Yais, and Danny Holiday from Kiss Connection, Wepa, you know, Esa Loca.
Yeah.
He got them to do ad libs
at
the end of this. Danny Vargas, rest in peace.
Yes.
He got them to do ad libs at the end, and whenever Mark's voice would come on with the ad libs, we all got goosebumps. We're like, "What? What is this?" And so this became the legendary underground demo that never happened. Okay, I still have a copy of it. Later on, Joey Gardner produced a different version with TKA.
May he rest in peace.
And they put it out. Also, rest in peace, Joey Gardner. So the record did come out, but that record didn't have the magic of when Frankie was singing it, and he had these people doing ad libs, right? Okay. So all that is happening. So now Frankie comes to me and he says, "Berrios, I want you to do a song with me. I want you to produce it." And I'm like, "All right." So come over one day. Comes over with some vinyl, you know, because we were always into the break beats and whatever. Now, remember, I had already done Make Noise, which was using a breakbeat loop, right?
Right.
Give It Up, Turn It Loose. The demos that we were already doing was also using breakbeat loops. So when he came and when we picked Sing Sing, we ended up picking Sing Sing as the breakbeat loop. We threw it on. I played the R8, the Roland R8 drum machine. In 5 minutes, we had the beat. Frankie did some keyboards. I did some keyboards. And that was it. Demo done, 15 minutes. We give it to Frank Reyes. Frank writes the song. I want to say in 4 minutes, but he's laughing right now. You know, he's just a really good writer. But Frank wrote the song, and then we brought Lisette was there. Frankie came over. Frank Reyes was there. I was there. There might have been a couple of other people in the room. I didn't even have a mic stand, so it was like, here's the mic. Hold the mic, right here. Yeah, here's the mic. So I hand Frankie Cutlass the microphone, and we're like, "All right, ready, go." And he's standing there. He's looking at me. He hands me back the mic, and I said, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "Honestly, Bo," he said, "I think this is it's a female song.
Wow.
I think you should give it to Lisette." And then from that, it just flipped.
Isn't that amazing?
And then next thing you know, Lisette did the demo. And then I spent a year and a half shopping that because nobody liked it.
Really?
Such a great song.
Nobody liked it. Nobody liked it.
Wow. But once it was released, everybody changed.
That is-
Yeah,
Listen,
that's all a different story.
These are great stories, and it's also the perfect time, right? Like these are the origins of freestyle, and the artists and everything you're sharing there. I mean, it's funny because everything you're saying, I'm correlating to a point in history with all these people, like Aldo and Cutting Records, and they leading the way with freestyle music, and you guys, but I was in at that time, I was already at Hot 103.
Mm-hmm.
Hot 103 success was based on all those records you already mentioned were already in deep rotation at that station because it was, the times it was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And you're saying that nobody wanted to buy it, and yet Lisette Melendez, that song Together Forever, smash it to this day.
Listen, I got great stories about that.
Yeah.
I told some of these stories back in the day, and people got, I hurt some people's feelings. Like Bruce Carbone was a friend of mine.
Atlantic Records.
Yeah, and something happened at the Winter Music Conference.
He went over to the Mercury after
Mercury for a while. Yeah. I didn't realize that I'd said something stupid, in public. But anyway, I'll tell you that was.
He was a DJ too, though. Right?
Yeah, but he's also from Flushing. That's how I knew him.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I don't think Anyway.
So just to finish the story, the loop. Yeah, we'll come back to Karina. So when when Together Forever happened, finally it was our first like really radio record, and so me and Frank as songwriters, producer songwriter, we were on our way, and so what ended up happening was, where originally, because Fever Records was one of the labels that didn't believe in the record, it was not a secret.
Yeah,
I took it to them. I had taken it to them before, and they turned it down. They didn't like it. But what happened was, they had just signed a deal with Def Jam through RAL, Rush Associated Labels, and in order for the contract to click in, they needed 2 singles before the end of the year. So they were desperate. And the first single they picked was "Notice Me, Sanday,"
right?
Yeah,
by CNC.
Yep.
And the second one was, they said, all right, we're going to do Lisette. But I knew they didn't like the record. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, the budget was great, so I was able to do exactly what I wanted to do with the record. I was able to produce it the way I wanted to, mix it the way I wanted to, edit it the way I wanted to, and we spent all the money on the record. But as soon as the record came out, and started to do what it actually lies, when it came out, it wasn't doing anything because the label didn't believe in it, so nobody was promoting it. Wow. Andy Panda called me up and he said, "Listen, I think we got a good record. The reaction on the street is crazy. Russell doesn't believe in it. Nobody at CBS believes in it. We're gonna have to do it ourselves. Do you want to go in half?" And I said, "Yes." I don't remember the exact amount of money, but it was like something like $15,000 to $20,000. And we hired that group that ended up being involved in the Frederick Dannon story, the Hitmen. They ended up getting in trouble, but they had control over the radio stations in the United States. Oh. So we hired 3 of them: West Coast, South, and Northeast. Yeah. And then all of a sudden we're on the charts. Then all of a sudden, it's top 40. It could have gone higher, but they didn't. It was happening too late. I'm telling you that story because as soon as that happened, all of a sudden they're screaming for an album. Wow. I'm like, what album?
Right.
And they need it like yesterday, right?
Well, that happened a lot to a lot of artists, and back then, they put out these great songs, and then all of a sudden it hits, and they say, well, we need their album, and go, right. Oh my God, we don't have an album.
So now me and Frank are locked away in a studio, actually the studio. It was my house with a keyboard and a drum machine.
In the cave.
Right?
You're in the cave.
Right. Studio, and so I got to, it was frustrating for everybody because I got to come up with the drum beats. I got to come up with the track, at least the initial chords. So otherwise, Frank can't start writing, and so he's pacing behind me. He's like, "What's going on?" Like a lot of frustration. So the record finally gets done, probably like 9 months later, way too late. But we had
a long time.
Yeah, but we had the second single, which actually was probably better than Together Forever, A Day in My Life Without You. Yeah. So we were able to come up with a stronger follow up.
Right. Nice.
Yeah, and then in the middle of all that, again, when I met Karina, she had a demo that she had done with several people. Several people were involved in this demo. A guy named Luis Capri. Al Pizarro was involved somehow. I think they recorded it in Jazzy J's studio. It was like a lot of people were involved. And when I met her, she had the cassette, and it was Temptation. And I remember liking the chorus, but I was like, but we already have this record, so let's do this first, and we'll get back to that later, right? So this is 1986, and so Out of Control comes out.
That was their first release, right? Because I remember that at the station.
That was her first record, my first record.
Yeah,
and then we didn't work again. After that. So we've had from the beginning a very strange relationship of misunderstandings, but we're kind of like almost like the yin and yang in a way, saying like somehow we work good together and that sort of thing.
Opposites attract, right?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was during that period where I was like desperate to find songs for Lisette's album, I found the cassette for Temptation. So I called Karina and I said, listen, if you're not, I found the tape. Are you going to do anything with Temptation? She goes, why? Why are you asking me? And I said, well, because, and I explained, I need songs for Lisette's album. We're kind of under the gun.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not going to use it, I'd like to use it for Lisette. So
it didn't go over well.
All I know is that it ended up on Karina's album. So we demoed it really quick. It's also a crazy story because we demoed that like in 5 minutes. I came up with that track really, really quick. We had to change the pre-chorus because it didn't work whatever they had, so we got rid of that. And Frank Reyes wrote something new, but the verses are exactly the same, and the chorus was exactly the same. The way they wrote it, and we just recorded it. And Atlantic was they had already known about Lisette, and so they said, well, we're not going to make that mistake. We're going to do this right. And so they promoted it from the beginning, and it went to top 10. It was number 6, I think, and not dance club. I'm talking about pop top 40 hit.
Top 100.
Yeah. And so of course that created a lot of problems for us because we were all so close. Lisette, Karina, Frank Reyes. We're all from the same families and stuff, and now we have 2 different labels warring with each other, and everybody's caught in the middle. And the radio stations were absolutely horrible to both Lisette and Karina. And it was what should have been the greatest time was kind of tense.
Yeah. Again, it's also a time when this is all new, and you guys are putting out hits on the left, hits on the right. And it's coming in the middle, and the station's saying, "I don't care where it's coming from. We just keep doing what you're doing, and what you guys got problems, you guys fix it. But we just bring me the songs."
By the way, as a filmmaker, I just want to say that you look fantastic on camera, and I'm lit like a chipmunk, bro.
That light. Now you know why I was climbing earlier, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna need you to climb back up there.
That? Amazing. So, all right. So, this is too funny. So, and we got cameras, and so we got a film producer in here, so he knows. Yeah. So that's on you, Jay. Yeah. So once again, we got Carlos Berrios in the Mix Lab here every Tuesday from 6 to 8. Jason Rios, your host. I'm Lefty Hernandez, and real pleasure to listen to the stories that we're hearing from Carlos Berrios.
Thank you.
And we've got still more to go, so tell us.
So many stories, yeah. Listen, so Frank, obviously, we had probably the better shows of all the artists because Frank was bringing his choreography history into the game, and he would work these girls until their feet were bleeding, and he would run the auditions, and with the professional dancers, I could kick. They say kick your teeth out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so he made sure that our shows were top notch. One of the people that he ran with in circles as a professional dancer. I don't know if you know this, Debbie Benitez, Jelly Bean's sister.
Debbie's sister.
Yeah, she's also one of those, and was part of a crew, that traveled the world and that kind of thing. So. At some point in the mid '90s, I don't remember exactly what year, Jelly Bean was hired as the music supervisor for Carlito's Way.
Right.
And Frank Reyes, I'm sorry,
Yes,
Debbie
that's right, he did.
Debbie Benitez was hired as the choreographer. She catches the flu, so she calls Frank and says, "Listen, you're the only one I would trust. Can you please take over for me for a day or two? I can't do it. I'm sick." So Frank goes and he does the job. He's working with Al Pacino and Sean Penn in the club scenes and whatnot. And on his downtime, he is reading the script. And, he reads it through and he says to himself, I think I could do one of these. So he does. So he writes a script. That particular script wasn't the one that got produced, but he wrote that first script and he was shopping it for a few years.
Right.
Met a whole plethora of clowns, saying that they were going to give him the money, all kinds of stuff. They just take you to the ring.
Yeah,
Whole bunch of people. Spent years doing that. We were signed to. I didn't say, but we were signed with our hit records. We were being sought after by the big publishing companies. So Russell Simmons tried to get us. Zomba tried to get us. EMI tried to get us. Warner Chappell tried to get us. And ultimately, we went with EMI because we liked the people that were talking to us. Like they were really good people.
So going after you, was in a good way.
Yeah, they wanted us to sign.
For a minute, that was like, wait,
no,
coming after us.
No, they wanted us to sign with them.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. So when you're in that position, they're gonna cut you a huge check.
Right.
And but we already knew if they're let's say they cut you $500,000 or $1 million. They're really advancing you your own money.
Right.
That's what it is. So in the end, we were just going for the top dollar. We were like, whatever, and plus we wanted representation anyway as songwriters. So we signed with EMI, and Frank became a lot friendlier with the guy who ended up being the person who signed us. Her name was Holly Green, and whoever was under her, his name was Evan Lamberg. Later on, eventually, he became the president of EMI Publishing, and now he's like huge. Like I think I don't know if he's with Sony or he's just big guy. So Frank he always loved people to read his screenplays, and so Evan was one of the people. He would visit him up at the office and throw the screenplay on the desk. He goes, "Yo, give it a read," and Evan's like, "I do music, man. I don't do He's like, "Just read it. Be a friend, read it, right?" So whatever. He did that enough where. When he got to the next screenplay, Evan Lamberg was doing a deal. I'm going to get this wrong, but Britney Spears' lawyer was representing a independent film production company, and that lawyer wanted a favor from Evan for this other big artist songwriter, and I don't know what he did, but he said, "All right, I'm going to do this for you, but you make sure that your producers read this script. I want to know that they read this script." So they read the script. And they're like, "We love this script. We want to make this movie." So they have a meeting with Frank. They bring him in. Evan didn't know that they were going to pull this. They were going to try to buy the script from him. So they come. I don't remember if they literally came with the check or they offered him a certain amount of money. And at that time, this was after all our music stuff had gone down. Radio stations changed.
Right.
Everything is different. We're struggling. And Frank tells a story. Probably didn't even have a token to get home, and they offer him, I forgot what it was. I wish I knew the number, but it was something like, I don't know, $30,000, $50,000. We'll cut your check right now. Give us the screenplay. And he stands up, and he says, "Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. I'm out of here." And he starts walking out.
Wow. And so, do you remember what that was? What that screen? What that?
Oh, he made the movie.
Yeah.
Empire. With John Leguizamo and Denise Richards.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, and Peter Sarsgaard. Yeah,
that's amazing.
It took like 6 or 7 years, but he never directed anything, never shot anything.
That's astounding. Those are great stories.
Unbelievable.
See, and I got to say this, people, that's the encouragement, right?
Yeah.
The influence, just the keep faith, keep the hope, believe. When you believe in something,
Absolutely.
just go. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and stick to it.
Yeah.
Before you go on, I just also, and I want you to continue that story. But you got great people listening.
Yeah.
A lot of your fans. I want you to say hi to Curtis Urbina, who's saying hi, who's out there.
Curtis Urbina.
Curtis Urbina's out there.
That's a legend.
Brian Chin.
Wow. Brian Chin.
Brian,
I told you, Brian Chin.
yeah.
Brian Chin signed Make Noise, man.
Yeah.
I love Brian Chin. He knows I
Yeah,
love him.
Profile Records.
Love Brian
Yep.
Chin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've
So,
got
man.
a lot of great people. I've got DJs from the record pool. Kenny
Yeah.
Febles, who tunes in with us all the time now, every Tuesday. He was one of my staff members at the record pool when we used to do the concerts,
Yeah.
the street concerts. But we've got fans, man, and so they're out there. So say hi and
Thank you,
keep
thank
telling
you.
your stories, bro.
Thank you so much. Yeah. No, it's some of the names you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Listen,
They're out there.
Brian, I want to get back to Brian because I always feel like, you know what it was about Brian? Brian, when you go to offices and you talk to A&Rs and, you talk to these people, you understand, we're dealing with someone behind the desk and it's business and that sort of thing. I never felt that with Brian. The reason why I love Brian Chin is because I always felt like he was treating me like a creative person, like an artist, like somebody, you know what I'm saying? Like that's the way he talked to me. And he had that ability. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, So I always.
He's so even keel. He's very, so personal. He's friendly. He's very he's just loving. I just saw him last week.
Such a humble guy.
And very inspiring. You know what I'm saying? I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm sure there were a lot of people that felt that way.
But you and I remember him when he was at Billboard magazine,
Yep.
and then he transitioned. He did work, at the Profile Records.
Right.
He said, "I just saw him last weekend
Right.
At the Nicky Ciano party."
Right.
And you talked about the Richard Long system. They have the Richard Long
They have
sound
a Richard
system
Long
there
system,
in the El Dorado at Coney Island is
Right.
still in there. And
Right.
so I got to read this to you so you know.
Okay.
Curtis Urbina, he says, what a joy and honor to watch Carlos grow through those years, and I am so proud of him. What a wonderful career in music.
Thank you so much, Curtis. Thank you so much. That means a lot.
Yep,
That means so
Curtis.
much coming from you. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
and that's why for our listeners it's important, and our listeners may not know who these people are, but now you do, and now people, we want you to know, right?
Right.
Jason, I wanted to say too, when you said about how, when you growing up, how we all grew up with culture and music in our house and the kind of music we listen to, right? Jason, right? In your house, the music was like.
No, it's more like what's a
sorry.
Spanish Christmas sound, Carl?
It was like
I get it.
the crack. I know, and I'm gonna pay for that one.
Yeah, you will, you will.
We
Not
just
right now,
try to
but-
have fun. I know.
Now I know. I'm looking at the monitor. I'm like, damn, he's good. He looks good. I'm just realizing
Delay,
you
right.
look like Robert Downey Jr.
Oh,
Honey, where's my Nancy? My Nancy could tell you the story really quick. We went to Wohop one day, having go have something to eat at Wohop, and one of the waiters would not stop looking at me. He would not stop looking, and then he finally worked up the nerve, and he said to me, he says, "You Iron Man, right?"
oh God.
That's great.
Holy
That's
smokes.
great.
That's hysterical. Well, thank you. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Anyway, so I don't have his Oscars, but anyway. All right. So go ahead. So tell us some more, man. So we're here with Carlos Berrios, and now we're transitioning, right? We're talking about music, and now we're actually going into the film.
Man, it's just so
film part
much.
of the history.
Yeah.
But tell us all. Listen, we still got time. Plenty of time. Go for it.
During that period, this was the mid '90s. We were having such a hard time. Will Sokolov had started Moonroof Records. He was also distributing Todd's label.
Right.
And I forgot the name of Todd's Freeze.
So Freeze. So
Freeze.
just again to bring people up to speed.
Yeah.
Will Sokolov was the owner of Sleeping Bag Records, which is an independent record label that is a lot of the hits that we've listened to. Todd Terry is the DJ who started doing some work, and he put out that label. Freeze label was one of
Freeze,
the. Yeah. So.
And so Will asked me if I would start my own label. And I'm like, well, what do you want me to put out? Freestyle's kind of like not happening right now. Because you can do whatever you want.
And
so
I want to
said,
circle back to that.
Okay.
Hold that thought.
So I said, all right, so let's do some freestyle, but I'm also, it just happened that there were certain, because Todd was primarily releasing his own productions on Freeze. Moonroof, I don't remember what Moonroof
I remember
was
the
doing.
label, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember what they put
yeah.
out. But what Will did was he would start sending me demos of house music. They were trying to get on Todd's label, but I don't know really what happened over there, why it wasn't happening, but he would send me the demos, and then there were a couple of times I was like, I like that, you know what I'm saying? So let's put that out. So it turns out, without even realizing it, that I was helping the early careers of DJ producers like Davidson Ospina and Peter Presta, and a couple of other ones, and you know, I'm like honored that you know, I was able to release on my label After Dark, you know, some of their early work. But I did release some freestyle, and one of the artists, I mean, there were several artists I was working with. This is going to be really confusing, but I met Brenda as Gemini's, C-Bank featuring Gemini's. She had done records with Mickey Garcia under the C-Bank moniker,
Right.
and she was featured as Gemini's. There were others, of course. There was Diamond Eyes, I believe.
I was just going to tell you that that artist, there was a lot of confusion, and there was a lot of that back and forth, giggles, and you know that.
Yeah. But when I met her, she was, you know, C-Bank featuring Gemini's at Lemoore East. She was there the opening night, so I still have the picture she autographed for me. So that's the way I always knew her. She was friendly. She was friends with Frank Reyes, and Frank brought it to me. And I remember at the time she wasn't ready. I don't know what happened, but it didn't happen. And then she ended up coming back again, and we ended up. There were certain songs on Lisette's first album that we felt, my God, nobody got to hear these. You know, like we had a couple of singles, but nobody really heard these songs. Like, you know, you don't hear them on the radio. So we grabbed one of those songs called "He's My Baby," and we remade it with Brenda, but we didn't want to use the C-Bank name, so we came up with a different persona for her, and we called her Joey May. Actually, that between Brenda and Frank, they made up that name. It was part androgynous. She's kind of tomboyish, you know. At least she was when she was growing up. And so Joey May. So we said, okay, so we're going to release "He's My Baby" under Joey May. But I also had a young girl named Bethany who had just won some contest with KTU, and I performed on one of her floats. That's the first time I saw her. I had another artist from Long Island named Nicole Daniels, and another one. Her name was Nina Benya. Her real name was Nancy, and she was actually one of Lisette's original dancers. Actually, one of Rihanna Page's original dancers, then Lisette's dancer, and so we were trying to create something, like really put a lot of work into, you know, the records and the music and the songs and the production, and you know, and Frank was handling. It was too much for Frank at the time because he was trying to get his movie made. So we were hiring outside choreographers to put shows together. Blah blah blah. The only record that took off was the second record we did with Joey May called "Promise Me Your Heart," and they got picked up by a label out on the West Coast for distribution. And she started doing shows on the West Coast and in Chicago, but not on the East Coast, which is weird. So, and it's a really nice record. I'm going to tell you a story. This is because this is important. I don't have a relationship with Todd Terry. I have a story with Little Louis Vega, but me and Todd always said hello, like in the hallway type of thing. You know what I'm saying? When he came up and he was doing the house stuff, everybody wanted to be Todd Terry. Everybody was copying what he was doing. You know what I'm saying? Like it happens, right? So to me, you know, Make Noise is just a sort of different version of what he was doing, like samples and that kind of thing. Right. That's really what it was. But when Together Forever came out, we had the same lawyer, and every time I would see him, he would almost be like, yo, I used your loop, bro, but I changed it. I flipped it. You know what I'm saying? Right. So I was like, he must be talking about Together Forever. I'd be like, don't worry, it's okay. Don't worry, you know, whatever. And I never thought about it, you know. I was like, it's Todd. You know, if Todd wants to use one of mine, it's fine, you know. Yeah. So,
well, we were also more. It was complimentary to us, right? If you use some of our stuff, we were kind of like honored, but not realizing the business end of it.
Yeah. So what happens? So now I'm doing the label with Will, right? Freeze. I get, you know. So he has records everywhere, and I see. So I'm always grabbing vinyl, and one of the records I grab, and it's Sage. Show Me the Way. I put it on the turntable. I listened to it. As soon as I hear it, I said, that's my beat. But he did flip it, and he made it different. But he made it like almost like he took like what I did with Sing Sing and then did some Planet Rock shit to it, and it sounded so good. And I was listening to that record over and over again. I love that record. Sage, Show Me the Way.
Right.
Love that record.
Yeah.
Love that record. That record should have done more. It should be known more.
Yeah.
That was an incredible Todd Terry freestyle production.
It's amazing.
And so what I did, and at first I used to tell jokes about it, and I hope it didn't get out there in a bad way, but it's kind of like the truth. I said, well, if Todd can take my beat and flip it, then I'll take the beat and I'll flip it too. So I sampled off of the Sage record, but I didn't flip it as much as he did. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's really the same loop. But that was the foundation of Promise Me Your Heart. Frank Reyes wrote the song. Joey May, Brenda sang it, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful song, And that was it. I think we did those two songs with Joey May. I had the label open for maybe 3 years, and then I was just like, I can't do this anymore, and I shut it down.
Wow, that's a great story. Some of those, you know what? After this, send us a list of these tunes so that we can, bring them back to life. And, again, the work that you're doing, you talked about Todd Terry, and remember that you guys, the freestyles, the highlight, and the bulk of the highlight works, like, we learned about the mixer and the remixer. Sure. But you guys, the editors were prime, and the work. And so, like, when you said Todd Terry, right, back to the beat, right? Yeah. You listen to that, dun, 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 and, and that's all that splicing and editing, and you hear, and it was very exciting to this day. It's that kind of.
He's changing the camera angle.
You're the producer. Tell him, teach him.
Listen, Rick, swing this light around that way.
Right.
No.
Well, Jason has film background too.
You have to turn that.
Que no, yo no voy para arriba, bro. I'm not getting you kidding. In the middle of a live show, it's like, Lefty, somebody catch him. He's coming down.
No. But listen.
But you guys were the highlight. So there was,
Listen, there's a lot of work that happened behind the scenes that people just aren't aware of. Like how it's accomplished. Like, and I'm talking about the technical aspect of it.
Right. Yeah.
We're talking about editing. I'm telling you, nobody knows what the hell we're talking about unless you were one of those people that were in the studio,
you witnessed it,
and you saw it for yourself.
Yeah,
you have no idea.
Amazing. I saw Tony Moran do it on 2-inch reels. The machine looked like a washing machine. Yeah, they were huge, and he had 2 of them in his house. Yeah. And at 3 a.m, he's editing. I thought a noise was blasting with his parents in the room. Right. And he's doing edit work when he was for Warner Brothers, and so it's amazing.
So the film thing. So that I laid the groundwork. Frank's now made his first movie. Miraculous that it got made, but he did it. We're all on set with him. We're hanging out. We're seeing everything that's going on. We're hanging out with Leguizamo and Isabella Rossellini and Nestor Serrano, and we're just it's like, wow, this is great. And Frank did a fantastic job, with Empire, and of course it inspired everybody. So now he's dealing with actors. I'm not really. What am I doing? I shut the label down. I'm inspired by what's going on. We're surrounded by actors now and other directors who are trying to get their stuff off the ground. So I enroll in acting class. I ended up taking a 2-year Meisner course, and I took it very seriously. You know what I'm saying? Sure. And just like everybody else, it happens. Like, this is the funniest thing. If you ever met anybody that does anything, whether they're cooking or doing anything, they become the expert because they read a book, right? Right. So I was the expert. I was like, in 1734, Konstantin Stanislavski, that kind of thing. And so I was really annoying.
He's honest. I love it because he said he's honest, right? He goes, So I was full of myself. Yeah.
It happens.
I love it.
So I ended up doing a couple of off-Broadway things and like small parts in some indie films, nothing that you would ever see. And at the same time, I ended up enrolling in karate for some reason. I'm not athletic at all, you know what I'm saying? And didn't do sports, nothing. I decided I'm going to do karate. Right?
You wanted to be the next Steven Seagal. That's what it was.
No, that's Steven.
Bruce.
But I was going through a phase in my life where I was like, I want to try new things. I need to experience new things. So that's what I was going through. So I wanted to be an actor first. I learned very quickly that it's better to be in front and behind the camera than in front of the camera. Yeah. For the first time in my life, I understood how singers felt when they worked with me. It's nerve-wracking for no reason whatsoever. No reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
You could be cool as a cucumber. You walk in, they hand you a piece of paper, and they go action, and all of a sudden the paper starts shaking.
The pressure's on.
Yeah, the pressure's on. Yeah, so I couldn't take it. The off-Broadway thing was every single night. I thought I was going to explode.
Right.
Anyway, so I quit. I quit doing that, and then I picked up a camera. I started learning lighting. I started learning editing, which was easy because, of course, and then and then that sort of translated to making music videos first. I started making music videos because I wanted the experience of working with a crew. I wanted to work with a director of photography. I wanted to work with a makeup artist. I wanted to work with,
props and
all that stuff.
Lighting.
Yeah, so I did several music videos, and then I was like, okay, time to make a short film. So then I made a short film in 2009. I don't know. I think it cost like $20,000, something like that.
And you wrote the material, or how did that?
That one I wrote. Yeah.
Also, technology changed, right? Because a lot of this stuff, the kind of the hardware and like music editing was actually, like we talked about, tape, but now everything is digital, right? So
yeah, I'm going to get back to that in a second because it's almost a tragedy, really, and I'm going to explain to you why in a second.
I'm sure, yeah.
But it was the transition to from CD quality to MP3 quality, from beautiful film, 35 millimeter film to now VHS, DV. Now they were making movies on digital, like the original digital video, and submitting it to Sundance Film Festival, and people getting deals and that kind of thing.
Because it was so much cheaper to to make.
Yeah. So it's it was the beginning of what ended up happening, but it was really not up to par at the time. But stories are stories. If you have a great story, then you can do it like that, and you can still tell a good story. But there's that aspect of having it. It's like saying a good song is a good song, but if you don't mix it right,
if you don't record it right, if you don't,
So it's kind of like the same thing.
Difference between a tinny sound or a really full orchestra sound. Or something.
So when Frank did Empire, they tried to get him to. I believe they tried to get him to do it digitally because it was. I think they had introduced the first digital cameras. I don't know if this is correct, but he was adamant that they were going to do it on film, so they shot it on 35 millimeter. The guy who was his cinematographer, Kramer Morgenthau, he had only done one movie, I believe, when we met him, which was a low budget thing. One of the other Latino directors was trying to, he actually made a movie called Destination Unknown, where we met other actors and all this stuff. We were part of this community. Like, me and Frank went out to the West Coast in 1996 because they were supposed to have this tremendous conference of Latino filmmakers, and all these things were going on. And then we realized that there really was no community. It was like people wanted to do things, but nobody was doing anything. And so then we started to get into the politics and the philosophy of why and the racism of the industry. And then you start to recall some of the racism, that we experienced dealing with the major labels, and you because you don't, Frank would have been more aware of it than I was because, he's Afro-Latino, Puerto Rican, dark skin, and I'm light skinned. So he would say things to me and I didn't always see it the way that he saw it. But there was an instance when we went to Lissette's Together Forever went top 40. And we were up at CBS. A guy named Jerry Blair. He was the executive vice president of East Coast Promotions, radio promotions. So his job was to pick up the phone and yell and scream bloody murder and curse at everybody. Right? That was his job. So we walk into the office one day, and that's what he's doing. He's cursing. He's like, "You dirty," all this stuff. And we walk in, and I wanted to know. We have a top 40 record. Why isn't it being played on MTV? We don't see it on MTV. Right. And
and you had the video for it.
And we had the video for it. Granted, it wasn't the Michael Jackson, $3 million video. Yeah. They gave us the bare minimum to shoot the video, but it was still a top 40 record. So what happens? It comes over, he shuts the door, right? And then he looks at us and he says, "Listen, we took it to MTV, but this is exactly like he said. They basically said, we don't play Latinos. We just don't play them."
Yeah. It is funny. A lot of people think that it doesn't exist.
I know.
Yeah.
And it does. I mean, it's clear as day,
Yeah. So there was that aspect of it. You know, Frank had to deal with that aspect of it in Hollywood. And anyone else who's tried to do anything in the media that large, you know what I mean? Coming up from the mid-'90s, this is a crazy story. I don't even know if I should tell it, but the truth is the truth. We went to Los Angeles to this conference, and Frank had he raised up enough money to shoot on film like a 3-minute trailer of the first script. He got Lauren Velez, he got Yancy Arias, and he got John Seda before he blew up. He was supposed to be the John Leguizamo character in Empire. Yeah. He was offered the role. He turned it down.
Wow.
So he makes this trailer. You know, it's rough, and it's cut to the Mexican. I'm in it. I'm walking with John Seda, and there's 3 of us hitmen in long coats. And I see that coat I got on, and we're walking down the street. I play it for you. And we go out to Los Angeles. Frank is proud. He's got his videotape and the whole thing. We're in this audience, and on the panel is some dude from Miramax, Gregory Nava, who did, I think, Selena and La Bamba, well, one of both, and a couple of other people, you know. And basically they were saying at that time, this is 1996, so they're saying if we want to elevate, we need to create our own situation, you know, a la Magic buying theaters and that sort of thing for the community. Magic Johnson, right?
Yeah.
Spending his money and doing this, right? So that's what they were selling. And Frank is like agitated, and Frank is like, when he gets agitated, he's just like going to say whatever. He's got no filter, right? So so I'm like, bro, what are you going to do? And he's like, yeah. He's holding a long line forms when it's Q&A time, long line forms, and he's at the end of it. So we have to wait all that time through all the nonsense questions. So now it's Frank's turn, and Frank goes, he goes, I just want to say that I'm disappointed in you and you for trying to sell us on the bull that you're feeding to these people. And then he turned to the audience. He goes, and I'm disappointed in you for applauding that bull, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So then one of them starts to ask him, well, what do you, Gregory Nava says, well, I think what Frank is trying to say to the guy from Miramax. And
he tried to clean it up. Right?
Yeah, so he goes, don't speak for me, Gregory, don't speak for me. I'm telling you right now, this is bull, because you would never say this to someone who's not Latino. You wouldn't tell anyone else to go and build your own theaters and build your own things and build your own that, you know, and it was something that everyone remembered who was there. The reason why, when Frank was shooting Illegal Tender, I was doing the documentary, like behind the scenes.
Right.
And I interviewed Calixto Chinchilla. He was the founder of the HBO Latino Film Festival in New York. I didn't know he was there. And you know, we've been friendly over the years, like all of us, right? And so I'm filming different people. I'm doing like little interviews. And now I'm talking to Calixto, and he goes, do you remember that thing that happened in Los Angeles? I said, you were there? He goes, of course I was there. He goes, what Frank did is the reason why I started the HBO Latino Film Festival.
Nice.
And I, you know, and different people have different recollections of that day. Some people were actually calling Frank, you know, hey, Frank, your friend Frank Reyes, isn't that the FU guy that was telling everybody he goes? I said, yeah, that's him, you know. But he earned respect from that town. You know what I mean? Like they knew, you know, listen, if you're gonna come at him, you gotta come correct. You can't mess with him. So John Singleton comes to him and says, I see what you're trying to do. I want you to make a Latino version of like what we did, like with Boys in the Hood. You know, like write a script.
Right.
I'm gonna finance it. So he did, and that's Illegal Tender. Yeah. And Frank made sure that he did it with all the cast predominantly Afro-Latino. You know, Rick Gonzalez.
It's funny because when I watched that movie, in the very beginning, there's a scene in the bodega.
Yes.
And I'm like, wait a minute, rewind.
Yes.
Hold on a second, rewind. I'm like, I know that guy. Rewind. I looked, I'm like, that's Carlos.
Yeah, that was me. That was funny because we shot that in Puerto Rico, and I got there early in the morning, and they said, yo, they want you in the trailer. I said, for what? And they said, I don't know. They want you in the trailer. What do you want me to tell you? So I go to the trailer, and they hand me a pair of tight jeans and a little tight jacket, right? So I'm like, what's going on? You know. So so I did this. I was not prepared for that at all, but it was fun.
That was an awesome movie, though.
Yeah,
That
the movie was great.
It was an awesome movie.
The movie's great. But anyway, that's how I ended up getting into the film stuff. So of course I transitioned on the technical side, directing, editing for other people, mixing in 5.1, like surround sound, and so now I do a lot of post production.
Now let me ask you something. Am I right in saying that you created the edit? I mean the commercial for the upcoming movie Lisa Lisa?
No, no, I didn't do the commercial. Tony Touch is part of like our family. Like he's been with us since he came up to New York. You know, I mean, obviously, did his own thing and became Tony Touch. But before he was Tony Touch, he was Tony Hernandez.
Right.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, we all knew he was like a monster DJ. But what he did later on with the mixtapes was that's just a whole story unto itself. But the fact that we knew him and we watched him grow in that way. So there was a point where I needed a road manager and Tony needed a job. So Tony was road managing Lisette Melendez. And that was the introduction to Fever Records. Eventually, Fever realized that he was a DJ and a good DJ. Plus, he was really good looking and all that stuff. The girls loved him. So next thing you know, he's opening up for groups, and he was the DJ for for these things. And that was sort of like the beginning of everything for him. I barely remember that, because we were going through so much. But he always brings it up, and I think it's like super exceptionally cool of him to remember it like that way, So they reached out to him because Lifetime A&E was doing a movie on Lisa Lisa, being executive produced by Lisa, and so he calls me and he says, listen, they might do this movie, they're talking to me about it, but they need somebody to recreate her records. Can you do that? I said, hell yeah. Just let me know when you're ready. So months pass. I'm like, Tony, is that happening? He goes, I think it's happening. Yeah. More months pass. Is it happening? I think it's happening. It's happening. I don't think it's happening, bro. Right? And then I get a phone call. He goes, yo, it's happening. So he's like, so Tony's coordinating everything. So he's like, gives me a timetable, gives me the songs. He comes over. We spend time together, blah, blah, and we're working on it. And I recreated Wonder If I Take You Home. Can you feel the beat? Yeah. And two of the other ones, the ballady ones. And I don't remember those, of course.
Let the beat hit. No,
it wasn't Let the Beat Hit. It was. I got them on my phone. I could play them. But the Lost in Emotion. Yeah, that was one of them, and then there was one more. Yeah. So the big problem was Lisa couldn't. She can't sing them, and so there was a search now.
She can't sing them. You said.
Well, number one, she no longer sounds like a 15-year-old girl. Right. You know what I'm saying? And so. Whatever the challenge was, plus, I know that she's had some health issues, and I'm sure that played into it also.
I thought that was because of, this business would happen. You'll write a song, and if you don't, the legal rights and something, you can't even sing your own song. But anyway, I just want to clarify. Thank you.
So so the whole process took about 3 months of doing the music, first analyzing it, which to me was so interesting because, I did what I did. I liked what I liked, but I never really tried to recreate. The only time I did it was with the Running Redux. Okay. And I think that's why Tony thought of me. So he, as a matter of fact, he said it just like that. He goes,
that was a great track too.
Thank you. Yeah. He said, that thing you did with Running, do you think you could do that with Lisa's tracks? I said, I think so. Yeah. So we did it. Yeah. They're almost identical except harder. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. The funny thing is, though, in the movie, when I listened to him, I was a little disappointed that they sped it up a little bit. It was like, why just speed it up, So,
is the movie out already? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
Okay, because I was
is that this?
My girl. We're talking about it's not. I was telling her no, it's not out. She's like, it is out. I'm like, no, it's not.
That's this one. That's the Can You Feel the Beat? Right. That's that movie. Yeah, that's the one I was telling you about. Yeah. So
no, it's out.
Does that have something to do with the speed of sound being one and the speed of film?
No. They just sped it up for whatever reason. Okay. You know how sometimes you go to a concert and they playing the song super fast, and I'm like, It doesn't have the same groove.
Yeah,
why are you doing it so fast?
Why?
I hate that.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah, so I was conscious of that, and I'm sure nobody else noticed. But
You just reminded me. I'm sorry not to cut you off.
Yeah.
But the movie, The Five Heartbeats.
yeah,
And there were the five heartbeats, but then they gave
Yeah.
it to a song to another group called the Five Horsemen, and, and they completely changed the whole song, made it real doo
Well,
wop,
that's
real
that's
slow.
about the Temptations, though, right? The Five Heartbeats, is it? Is it not?
No, the Five
I thought
Heartbeats.
that was
yeah.
the
Five-
movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, was it about? I don't know.
I thought it was
I
about
don't
the
know.
Temptations.
No.
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Oh,
Yeah.
maybe it's like Eddie and the Cruisers. Like, who was that about?
No,
Was that a real
the
guy?
Five Heartbeats.
Right.
That
No,
was-
I remember. I remember
Eddie
the
and
movie.
the Cruisers.
Yeah.
That was a
Right,
good
Eddie
one.
and the So, yeah. So the funny thing is this. So I recreated 4 songs, and then all of a sudden they asked for one original because they needed something for the opening of the movie. So they sent me the opening of the movie, and I said, well, this is early '80s, so now I'm making early '80s type of beats. Like because I was already doing it with, Can You Feel the Beat and that stuff, but now I'm doing something original. So I'm pulling out. I'm searching the internet for a DMX drum machine. I can't find any. And just like that month, somebody put out a plugin that emulates the DMX.
That
So I'm like,
amazing?
oh,
Wow.
yeah. So I'm like, so anyway, so I make the beat. We do the beginning, and originally they wanted to write it, so they wrote it. I was trying to get somebody that I knew to sing it. They wanted their singer. They sent me vocals. I didn't work with them. They sent me vocals. I mixed it. So, to me, it sounded great. I sent it back to them. They're like, nah. They're like, give it a shot. So then I got Frank involved. Frank wrote the song. Brenda, Joey May, sang the. It was like 1 minute. So she sang the piece, and they listened to it, and they're like, still no. So they ended up using like some hip hop track. Like if you listen to it, it's kind of like hip hop is, kind of breakbeat is. Yeah. So it worked. Whatever they did. But now I have this 1 minute track, and it's like, I think this sounds great, man. So we just finished it up, and we're releasing it like in 2 weeks.
Oh, nice.
Joey
Wow.
May, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm looking at the clock and I'm getting upset. But anyway, so tell us about a couple of projects. So in film wise, what do you got in store? What's coming up? And I had a backtrack question about we talked about freestyle before, but tell us about some. What do you got? What are you working on now, or what do you got coming up? You just mentioned release in 2 weeks. So
a friend of mine who's in the salsa world, he actually worked on Mark's album with as an arranger or background with Sergio George. Yeah, and his name is Luchito Cavacas, and I met him through George Lamond. He produced George's first salsa album. So I've been involved with him for a while, so I'm mixing Latin tracks for him. Wow. And they just did, I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to be talking about this, but he did a song. George told me I could. He did a song with George Lamond and Judy Torres because they're in a play,
right.
a David Maldonado play.
Yep.
And so they did an original song, and it came out, really, really good. And so now, Lucho, who I originally met on George's first, that's a good spot, man. You can leave it there. Yeah.
I just thought the mic's right in front of you.
he's a film director.
That's all right. I'll just raise it up a little bit.
There you go.
But anyway, so from the day I met him, we shot a couple of trailers with him acting and his little daughter acting, and just when we were first learning how to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It never left him. The bug never left him. So he's been trying to do something ever since. He raised up some money. He's got a screenplay that he wrote, but it needs work. So now I'm involved. I just did a rewrite on it. We have to continue to finish it up, but chances are that we're going to be filming this thing in a few months. It's a small story, low budget, and we're probably going to have to do it like either in Colombia or Dominican Republic.
Wow.
But that's kind of like what I'm working on now.
Okay.
I've worked on, sometime like the last film I worked on, I was in post-production with it for like almost like a year and 4 months because I did 3 jobs. I did the editing, then I did the sound, and I did the color correction. And each one of those things can take anywhere from 3 months to, depending. If you cut the film and you don't have big issues, then it just comes. It's just about working on the timing of it. Like the little ebb and flows and making sure that it transitions from one moment to the other. Right. But if you have a story hole, that sort of thing. Now you get into a problem because now you have to start doing things like switching the scene that's at the end and putting it at the beginning.
Yeah, you got to match
things like that.
You have to match. Yeah.
And every little thing that you do affects the rest of the film.
Right.
And so I love editing film. I mean, it's amazing because of that. You can change intention simply by removing a few frames or adding a few frames. You can make a character. You could change the reaction. You can make him. You can make him. Be accepting. You can make him. You could create jealousy that isn't there. You can do all kinds of things.
Sure.
Yeah, with just that sort of thing. So I love doing it. So so usually if a film is going right, you have about maybe 10 to 12 weeks. You get it.
Right.
You fine tuned it. You test it for audiences. Because things that you think are working, sometimes they're not, and they give you ideas. Also,
you're also zoned in. What you see all the time, you think it's great. You need somebody else to see it in order to get some feedback.
It's funny because you're reminding me. I used to work with this cinematographer called Mark Minucci, and we worked on a film called Red Apple Rest with Jerry Stiller and Ed Eisenberg.
Right.
And every time we went, every night we would do it on 96th Street on Broadway. We would do dailies.
Yep.
And he was just like you, like the way he was talking, like the beat, everything has to match the coloring.
Yeah.
I sometimes I would look at him like, what's going on in your brain? And like,
no, I have people that I follow, like if you want to learn about, songs and things, you look at songwriters, and then depending on the style, like which songwriter is going to inspire you, is it the Beatles, is it Bob Dylan, whatever it is. So when I found myself editing films, I started really studying all the films that I already loved, and I found a common denominator as far as editors are concerned.
Right.
So then I started not just studying those editors, but their history and the history of the people that inspired them. Right. Top of the list is Walter Murch. Walter Murch to me is number one because he's probably the most philosophical of all the editors. He's retired now, but Walter Murch met George Lucas when they were in college together and ended up being his sound designer. So he was all into sound. And this is why I love him, because he didn't start editing until later. He was all about sound. He helped to develop the 5.1 surround thing specifically for Apocalypse Now. He was part of that team.
Is that part of Dolby, or no? Is that something different? I know what you're talking about, 5.1.
Yeah, it just means the speakers, the system, right?
Okay.
So, Dolby is something else. So he had a book that he wrote. If anybody's interested, he wrote a book where he explains the concept of editing through anecdotes and comes across kind of philosophical. For instance, I'm going to give you one example that I love. If you cut, like today, it doesn't really matter. Everybody's doing everything, so it almost doesn't matter today. But when I first started studying him, if you cut from a close-up of somebody to a little bit more of a close-up, that's a jump cut, and it's jarring. It's bringing attention to itself. You can do that on purpose. You would do that, let's say, like in a fight scene, something like that.
Right.
But if two people are having a conversation, it's jarring. It doesn't work. It's like it's not proper film language, right? Yeah. And he said the reason why it doesn't work is because the audience's brain, you're doing something to them. So he said it's not unlike you take a beehive of bees, right? And while they're away, if you move that beehive 10 feet,
you're in trouble.
They're going to come back and hover where it was.
Oh, okay.
They don't know that it's 10 feet away, and they stay where they're hovering, and they die right there. If you move it 10 miles away, they're going to find it because of the juxtaposition.
I understand that.
Okay? So you can't go from a close-up to a little bit more of a close-up, but you could go from a close-up of the eyes to a crazy wide shot of the Sahara Desert, a la David Lean. Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
That works.
That works, sure. Because it's seen that's what he's through his eyes.
Well, it's the juxtaposition,
right?
What you're doing to the viewer's brain,
to the mind, yeah.
So when you read his book, and so I just loved the way he explained things, and his own, even he had a different technique of editing, and that I latched onto because it made sense to me,
So that's interesting, and I wish we had the time to talk about it. But what about, do you have you ventured or watched avant-garde movies for that same reason? Because you know that avant-garde movies, like you'll see something like you'll see a guy in the scene, he'll have a red shirt, and then they'll cut away and come back and the shirt is yellow or something. No, but that's what avant-garde is. It's all it's weird kind of editing, kind of stuff like that. It's that mind again. You're talking about what their mind conceives.
When I found that I loved film, it was that sort of the same thing that I did with the editing happened naturally. So it happened with directors, it happened with actors, it happened with cinema of different countries. So there's Italian cinema, French cinema, German cinema, and that sort of thing. I learned about Eisensteinian editing. So there was this Russian guy. I think his name was Sergei Eisenstein.
Yeah,
and he was experimental with his editing. He edited like in the early 20s, I think it was, the same way they're editing. They edit now, like for TikTok videos or MTV fast cutting, that kind of thing. He was doing back then. He was trying to create an emotional response in the audience through edits in a way that nobody had ever tried to do before. So there's this film called Battleship Potemkin. I think it's 1916.
Yeah,
and there's this one scene where a soldier, first of all, it's about class difference, right? So you have the officers who eat really well and they have proper meals, and the lowly soldiers who are eating, meat with maggots and things like that. Right? So at the end of the meal, there's a sailor. He's washing plates and like in a little pail, and he's washing. And on the edge of the plate, it says, "Give us this day our daily bread," right? So he's wiping it and he's reading it, and you see him getting angrier and angrier. And you cut from the plate, you cut to his face, you cut to the plate, and his attitude is changing. Finally, he lifts the plate up over his head, and slams it down onto the floor. But Eisenstein did it in like 10 cuts, so it was like gong, 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 gong. And he created through. He mirrored the anger of the character with editing, and that was the reason why he was so important to what came later. What he was experimenting with ended up manifesting in like the shower scene of Psycho.
Yeah.
Or the last scene where Jake LaMotta's fighing Sugar Ray.
Yeah.
Same thing.
See, but that's what I was trying to do right now.
But those are those. Well, and it's funny you say that because I did film and I took film and I recognized everything you said and so Nosferatu, that kind of stuff. Was it the same Battleship Potemkin that did the whole Bolshevik with the soldiers and the stairs and down the stairs,
which has been copied like countless times.
Well, the Untouchables.
The Untouchables.
Yes. So and that's that kind of editing and stuff like that. But it's to bring that reaction. It's amazing. Wow.
So here's just one last. I mean, we got stuck on film. I didn't get to speak about. I didn't get to speak about Sammy.
Well, you know what? You've got it's 7:47. We still got some good time to talk about. So Sammy Zone, you working with him?
Sammy, I met Sammy in the mid '90s, and it's or late '90s, I think. I had just finished a double CD thing that I wanted to do because I hadn't done music in like 10 years at that point. The Will Sokolov After Dark Records shut down in 2007 or 8, something like that. So around, I'm sorry, 97 or 98. So in 2007, I decided I wanted to try to do a project. I had like 4 or 5 unreleased demos that I never finished. Mm-hmm. And I liked them very much. So I wanted to finish them up. That's how it started. Then all of a sudden I started to create new music, which was really hard for me at the time because Pro Tools didn't have there weren't the type of plugins and things that there are now. And so I'm trying to create in a way that I never really created before with plugins and that sort of thing. I used to have, the SB1200 and the keyboards and Juno 106s, and now I'm trying to do it with, these little plugins.
Right, less is more.
Yeah, so it was really difficult. So next thing you know, I met the first original record ended up being with George Lamond. Then I did the one demo that I had was with Lisette. Then we did another new song. I brought in Bethany from After Dark Records. Joey May did like two or three songs. I had K7. I invited everybody. I invited Betty D, but I could never get to her. Judy Torres. At that time, she didn't really want to do freestyle, and I understood. That was fine. There were other people that I invited, and the people that are on there, I can't remember everybody. Ron Esco, we had some really good stuff. Ended up being about 22 new songs that I released in 2007 or 2008. And for the remaining freestyle fans, it was like, you know, something really tremendous for them, because it was the first time somebody was doing new music that was, you know, not everything didn't sound the same. I was experimenting again. You know? Yeah. So it came off really, really well. Did I make money? No.
Yeah.
So after 2 years of sweating over that thing and putting it out, I retired again. That's when I met Sammy Zone. So I was in a club. I was invited because you know, people were getting excited about the CDs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to this small club in Queens, and this guy that I'd never seen before comes up to me, and he's like, I always say he was like the Tasmanian devil. That's how much energy he had. He's like, yo, you heard him, right? He's like, Berrios.
Yeah, I know. So
he's like,
yo, he's always like,
yo, I'm a fan. You don't understand? You don't understand.
He's always smiling.
Yeah. He's tremendous energy.
Is this the lemon tree?
The lemon tree, yes.
Okay,
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And there's even pictures of that night. So I'm like, who is this maniac?
Right? Tasmanian. Who is this Tasmanian?
So a little later on, he's performing. I don't know any of his songs, you know, because they weren't part of the mainstream. You know, he was part of the underground. So he does his stuff, but I'm watching it and I'm like, Jesus, he's got tons of energy. He's just like, wow, really doing. So I liked him. You know, we had exchanged numbers, and so I said, I'm going to do, I called him up and I said, I'm doing a new song for the set. You said you're a songwriter. I'm going to give you a shot. Let's see what you do. I had the demo. The demos, the tracks that I had were actually the leftovers of that double CD thing. Because what I was doing was I was showing people, pick a track that you like, and that's the one we're going to work on. Whatever you're attracted to. And that's what I tried to do. Whatever was left over and wasn't used, there was like maybe 5 to 7 tracks left over. So I played them all for him, and he goes, I like that one. I said, okay. So whips out a pen and paper. He starts writing. And whatever he's writing, he's humming. I said, I like that melody. I said, you know what? I don't want you to forget it. So I'm going to set up the mic.
Grab the mic.
Right?
That's right.
So I set up the mic. I put it up. And then now he started to put the words together. Now he's singing them. And as I'm listening to him in headphones, I'm listening to the tone of his voice. And I realize, oh my, this dude has a tremendous voice.
Very talented.
So now I'm like, I don't want to say anything yet because I don't know if he's a serial killer, right? So he literally finishes the song. We lay down the vocals, but we worked on them. I really, you know, like I was like, I don't know what's happening here, but we worked on them. I got them, you know, we worked on them until I got them the way I wanted them, and then left it alone. I was like, thank you. I'll let you know what happens. He leaves, and then I'm just like listening, and I'm like, and because of the way he sang it, the track ended up like doing a 180. Whatever he sang to, that wasn't the track anymore. I ended up doing a brand new track around his vocal. I built up the, I built everything around him. I created a break with the harmonies and the drops and everything. And then I call him, and I don't remember if I made him come over, if I sent it to him, but I know he told me this. I don't remember. So I think he wasn't in the room. I don't know. But he heard it and he started crying.
Wow.
Because he says, I've never, ever sounded like that. Ever. Wow. Nobody has ever made me sound like that. And we released that record. It's called Without You. And when we put it out, people lost their minds. And this is 2009. That's awesome. This is like freestyle is over. But so
that's a great story, man. Yeah. Oh man. And you know, and I wanted to ask you, it's funny, and you kind of answered that too. And you know, some of the answers are obvious, but because freestyle was so impactful. Yeah. But today it's so, I mean, it you see these concerts like Sal does, you know, the freestyle concerts all over town, you know, they'll be throughout the entire year, and the same artists, you know, and the places the arenas get filled. Yeah. But as far that's music. That's almost like doo-wop music, right? So people that who love doo-wop, that was great, but now it had a hard time surviving, right? Because it's a demographic thing.
Yeah.
And it's sad. It's sad because it was so impactful. And is it? And I wanted to ask, like, why do we challenge? Why is it so difficult for the music that we love so much to stay alive in contemporary times? Is that kids? Is it do they not? I just don't know. Did I?
This is a very interesting thing because
is it a formula like the music?
Well, part of it is listen, and this is the truth. There's only a few records that have been done, that can fight for a place in the pop world, in the real, that could be competitive to whatever's out there. There's only a handful of those, of the hundreds and hundreds that have been put out. I don't think the people really understand how important it is for you to have a quality song, a quality performance,
right.
and a production that doesn't sound like the 10 that came before.
Right.
And so that, but I say that with the understanding that everything is a flavor of the month, right? So if somebody puts out a record and it sounds like, let's say Miley Cyrus puts out something that has this style, all of a sudden there's going to be 10 more records.
Right.
There was a point where I had no idea who was singing because they all sounded the same. This is pop records, right? So because it's a style. So I guess that's not really the 100% excuse, but I always say, I always felt that doesn't mean, like, you should not have an excuse not to put your best foot forward, because then that you tried your best. You know?
That's right.
So if I know everybody can't say that. They can't say I tried my best, or if they did, then
I get it. Yeah.
Then you're fighting against your own limitations.
They're jumping on a bandwagon rather than thinking outside the box.
No, well, what I mean is, it just, listen, I have my limitations, and I know what they are. You know? I can try certain things, like when I started mixing Latin, that's a challenge because I didn't know how to mix Latin.
Right. But you gotta try.
Yeah, but you got to try, and you figure out, and you're honest, and you listen. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm not doing this correctly.
Right.
So here's the thing. My biggest inspiration coming up pre-freestyle, right? I'll call him the father of electro, right? John Roby.
John Roby.
When you think of John Roby and what he did in the early '80s and his style of keyboards, like basically inspired the entire era, that whole thing, and inspires people to this day, and
to let people know, AEIOU was John Roby.
John Roby,
right.
One More Shot.
One More Shot. Yeah.
I didn't even know this, and I started researching more of him because you don't find a lot of information about him for the influence that he's had. Quadrant six.
Quadrant 6. Body Mechanic.
So when I think of key lines, that are hooky, I don't think anyone has ever done key lines that are as hooky as John Roby. Whatever it was that he was doing, wherever his mind was at. And so here we are, however many years later, and we're still trying to emulate what he created back in those days. I know that he feels that he's the creator of freestyle.
Yeah.
I know that he feels
the electronic. I know that.
But it's the electronic, and I'm going to say this. This is the reason. Don't cut me off.
Go ahead.
He created what became the foundation for freestyle later on. But as far as I'm concerned, freestyle is nothing but has always been a lesser version of what he did, and has been trying to do what he did ever since, and never achieving. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because, and that's always the case with something that comes first.
But also the instruments. You had an emulator, which was part of that was early.
Well,
But go ahead.
I came up during a time when the keyboards were already programmed. You had patches. You can go through. You could buy a keyboard and use any sound. I think that. I'm not 100% sure, but I would say he came up at a time where you had to create the sound from scratch.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? There's a difference.
Yeah.
As far as creativity.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So I don't always get to say it, and I always forget to. But we owe them
amazing
a lot.
Listen, guys,
Carlos.
I love you guys, man. But
this is amazing,
you
Carlos.
guys, you see how fast this time went by, right?
So we do this every Tuesday, and Carlos, so you've had some amazing stories. Thank you so much for your influence. And I want you to, really quickly, Kenny's out there in his scripts. He said, and I love it, and I got to share this with you. He says, Carlos has such great experiences. He can easily be a mentor and an aid in the success for other Latino aspiring artists.
Thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, and it's true. And again, we also, as Latinos, as a culture, we need to keep doing this, remind people, we need to come together, we need to collaborate, we need to stick it out, we need to, agree to disagree and all that wonderful stuff, because if we don't, somebody else will, and we're going to be watching from the balconies, and we don't,
Well, guys, we want to thank you guys who tuned in to the Mix Live. We're here every Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m.
We didn't even have time for calls, man.
Whcr 90.3 FM. Carlos, before we go, we want to thank you so much for joining us and for...
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Now he becomes an official member.
We would like to give you one of the Mix Lab
event staff
badges. You know,
I'll be here next week.
There you go. Yeah. Speaking of next week, Bobby Morales, right?
We got Range. Range, I believe.
Is it Hiram Cruz and Joey Gomez and his brother?
That's right.
Hiram's brother.
Next week we have Paul and Hiram. And Joe Gomez.
I call him, Joe Espanol, Hiram, right? Hiram Cruz.
No, I'm wrong. Bobby Morales.
You see, I told you. All right, we'll get it together, people. We'll get it together. Tonight, Carlos Berrios in the studio. Thank you so much for blessing us with all your skills and talents and your stories. Amazing. Next week, it is Bobby Morales, and we do have Hiram and Paul. I call him Hiram. I don't Hiram. You used to call him Hiram, and we'll get it together. Range Music, Joey Gomez, and who are you?
Jason Rios. And who the heck are you?
Lefty Hernandez, man. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Carlos, once again, man. Blessings.
You guys are awesome. Thank you, the listener. We love you guys. Back next week at 6 p.m., 6 to 8, the Mix Lab, the place to be. Whcr 90.3 FM.
The voice of Harlem.
We'll see you on the radio.